Hi, everybody. I'm back on Facebook Live. This is Heather Carlucci, medical intuitive and psychic medium. And today, as I said, we're going to talk about the pineal gland. I got a little overly excited about this one because there's a lot about the pineal gland. And for those of you that sort of follow me and read my work or are my clients know that I like to talk about medical work very scientifically. It's how I read it. It's how I see it. And luckily for me, it also helps me communicate with doctors that I work with, and it makes it much more easier for patients to go to their doctors and talk about exactly what their concerns are if I've brought them up or something that they really can't find. Hi, Ellie. Anyway, so the pineal gland. Now this is the one gland that really people have a lot of opinions about it and statements about it because it doesn't just completely embrace anything completely medical as anything we talk about the body does, but it also falls really deeply into spirituality. I mean, a lot of uncharted waters as well. Also, in the course of studying about it, very last minute, just literally minutes ago, I finally found something online where somebody wrote about it in the same exact way as I read it when I do psychic readings for people. So this was very exciting for me. So, okay, first off, the pineal, and by the way, I have notes taped all around my computer, so because I had so much to say, and that I kind of want to get it right. I don't want to go all over the place as I sometimes do, as you've probably all experienced if you've watched these things. So the pineal gland sits in the brain. It is an endocrine gland. And endocrine glands are the glands of the endocrine system that secrete their products, hormones, not through a duct, but directly into the blood. They also include like pituitary glands and testes, ovaries, pancreas, thyroid, parathyroid, adrenals, and there's something else I'm forgetting. It would be like hypothalamus. Anyway, that being said, it sits alone. It sits smack in the middle of the brain. It is maybe 8 milliliters big, but the size of a pea. It's the shape of a pine cone, hence the name pineal. And it is also known as, at one time, it says it was used to be known as the third eye. I don't know why they say it used to be known. Wherever you read it, it says it used to be known. I don't know where that argument happened, where it decided. I don't know if it was like between like Gandhi and Darwin, but a lot of people do consider it, the third eye. And we're going to get to that in a minute. So it sits there, and what does the pineal gland do? It produces melatonin, and it regulates our daily and seasonal circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms are the rhythms throughout the day that guide when we're tired, when we're awake, our sleeping patterns, drowsiness, peaks of energy. That's what circadian rhythms are. They also, the pineal gland also helps up with seasonal, how we feel, and usually with seasonal disorders, it's usually very much affected. And we're affected by seasonal disorders more than anything nowadays because we do not have to live our lives outside like we're really built to. We're built to have to still go out and get food and still go out and like get trees for fire and everything else. And nowadays we can just sort of sit there and order seamless and have our lives taken care of for us. Our bodies do not function in the way they're really built to. So anyway, it regulates our melatonin. And we all know melatonin is something that very much affects our sleep. It's the chemical in charge of all of our sleep cycles and our quality of sleep. And what's really interesting, which I only learned recently, is melatonin is also in charge of fighting against free radicals. Amazing, right? So we're already seeing now it has to do with our sleep, and it has to do with our hormones. So it regulates the onset of puberty, and seasonal breeding in animals. I won't make any spring break jokes. I promised myself I would, and I'll stop there. Also, let me read my notes here because I want to get this right because I had so many thoughts involved. Serotonin, which is sort of that happy chemical responsible for the uplifts in our mood, is transformed into melatonin only in the pineal gland. So it's pretty amazing at this point that this little tiny pea-sized gland is in charge of so many things, right? So we can sort of see why it is really sort of considered the third eye. Now that's just the beginning. It's considered the third eye for a number of reasons. But those are some major things because really what do our bodies do? We deal with sleep. We deal with hormones. This is how our body regulates itself, and it helps us with moods. All right, so already we have the beginning. Now, as I was saying, in certain traditions, it was referred to the ajna, or the third eye, and the gate that leads to inner realms, the spaces of higher consciousness. So it actually also has to do a lot with dreams as well. We'll get to more of that for my yogis out there. I'm sticking to the doctors and the medical intuitives right now. Now, this is what I got really excited about because when I read and I see the pineal gland in a reading, which isn't often, and we'll get to sort of the maladies that happened with the pineal gland in a moment, but I see it literally almost as the same material makeup as our actual eyes. And I wasn't sure if necessarily that's how it was being translated to me so I could understand what it is I was seeing, because sometimes that's what happens when you're reading. The translation and the wording is so that you can understand it. And I always allow for that, although because I read very, very medically, and as a client said to me the other day, she's like, you really give facts. It's not, you're not loosey-goosey about it. You're not giving ideas and concepts. You're very much about facts and the literal when you read, which I was thrilled to hear, because it's somebody that I couldn't stop reading for. I almost read her for 2 hours, which is not typical, by the way. But I found this website, which was very exciting, and I read this, and I'm going to read the actual thing. It was from a website I do not know, and I did not have time to really research it, but this is exactly how I read it. So I wanted to sort of, it was well written, and I want to do it. The website is called upliftconnect.com. So it says this: scientific evidence supports, footnote, I don't know that for sure, I'm just telling you what it is that I read, the possibility that our third eye, or our pineal, was once our first eye. Under the microscope, the pineal is made up of cells that have the same features as the rod-shaped light-sensitive cells found in our retinas. Now, that was the first really exciting thing for me because I do actually read the pineal as almost like rods and cones. The pineal gland receives signals that travel down the optic nerves. It seems the primitive third eye functioned as a sight organ before our current set of eyes. All of you know, I am all about science, so I'm all about evolution as much as I am about the spiritual. I will always say, I just don't think or I know that we just haven't found the link between the two that make our spiritual as factual as many of our scientists would like. But we're on our way. The pineal gland gives a perception of the world around us through our senses. It controls the action of light upon our body and is located beneath the cerebral cortex, where the two hemispheres of the brain join. So basically right there. This is a place where the brain regulates consciousness and interprets the body's sensory and motor functions. Now, what I find really interesting about much of this is when they were talking about perception of the world through our senses, is how memory is so triggered by sense of smell, sense of hearing, and not always through sense of eyes. And that it seems through evolution, we got these instead of that. but that one settled into our brain. So it sits there and regulates more our dreams, our thoughts. So anyway, getting on about that, that was what I was very excited about. I love anything with evolution. I'm happy to talk about anything spiritual and religious, but I love me some science. So Descartes, philosopher of philosophers, and one of my dearest friends reminded me, who was a philosophy major in college, shout out to Kara, who's always the biggest supporter, called the pineal gland the seat of the soul. Now, as I wrote in my notes, I'm going to write it here, there is removal of the pineal gland, as we know it. So there isn't. It's not a seat of the soul in literal terms. Removal is very, very rare. It usually happens from a pineal cyst. It's very rarely done. It can usually, if you really want to go the very Western allopathic route, you can work on it with radiation and chemotherapy. That's your option. Also, options are more medical, specifically. One of the things that reacts fastest actually to detox is actually the pineal gland and the cysts that can grow around it. The people who have their pineal gland removed are still alert, conscious human beings. So they might have trouble sleeping. I don't know long term. I've read a lot of studies more on the shorter term effects. And some actually who have perception and have a strong intuition sort of feel that even after they seem to be even more psychic after. So oddly, especially since Theosophy states that, well, it usually states that, you know, the pineal is the source of clairvoyance and intuition. But I think in some ways we've gone beyond our own organs in the way that we see things and feel things and have sensory moments that are psychic phenomenon that perhaps go outside of our own glands that they help trigger. Health-wise with the pineal gland, the biggest problem, other than a cyst, and even that comes through this, is the calcification. The pineal gland is very, very affected by fluoride. Fluoride creates a calcification in and around the pineal gland, and nowadays that's in our drinking water and our toothpaste. It accumulates, and more than any other organ, and leads to those formations of the phosphate crystals. That's what that is in there. As it hardens due to the crystal production, the less melatonin is produced, and regulation of like awake cycles and sleeping cycles that get disturbed. And then of course you have your hormone disturbed, which in my experience, most hormone imbalance are not really approached too much in Western medicine, enough that they should be. The fact is that we're completely made up of hormones. And what I always found very interesting is that when we go through hormonal things, I'll get personal with this just to give you the example. Like when I started menopause, the first thing I did to sort of get rid of like the sickness and the aches and the weirdness and the hot flashes is I stopped eating meat and eggs. Because what are they? They're balls of hormones. And let me tell you, the difference was huge in less than 48 hours. These are things we have to, this is what the pineal gland does actually regulate. Another thing really fascinating, let me look through I was writing wildly the other day to get, so I didn't want to forget anything because I was just so excited, and I like to keep these like kind of short. I don't want to go on and on past a half an hour. I like to get some questions in as well. So one of the really interesting things that I've been reading on is a lot of sort of more scientific experiments have discovered that DMT, which is the most powerful psychedelic substance known to man, how about that one? It's released in the pineal gland of lab rats. Which actually stands for dimethyltryptamine, which I probably did not say that right at all. It's a really long word. I'm just going to stick with DMT on this one. And it's believed that it's released during near-death experiences, which if you think about it, hallucinations, visions, opening of consciousness always seems to happen if you've ever experienced the death of somebody. I think more than hallucinogenic experiences, it's more of an opening of the consciousness. People seeing the other side, people seeing people wait for them. I have some friends right now doing a lot of writings about and note-taking on the sudden rise of the Western culture indulging in ayahuasca, which really was not supposed to be taken as a hallucinogenic, but as a conscious opening drug. Very different. We think of hallucinogenics as taken really for like fun, right? Leisure drugs, as it were, when in fact it should not be that. It should really be a consciousness opening experience. But anyway, so our pineal gland very possibly holds the DMT in it. And when awakened, and we're going to get to this awakening because I had a couple questions about that, it enables us to sort of have visions, be more clairvoyant, and open up to the psychic gifts if we're not already open to our psychic gifts. They consider it vital to spiritual growth, people who sort of lean towards this. And of course, this is where we come back to our third eye and more Eastern beliefs in the body and how the body is made up. And it's really because it's pivotal to our spiritual growth in this, and because the calcification happens so fast, it's really important that we kind of keep ourselves free of the toxic substances and keep it as clear as possible. And then it leads to the belief that the spiritual connection to higher energies gets rid of us, which, you know, as we sort of walk into a more and more and more industrialized world, we're seeing that. Luckily, and more interestingly, there's a good part of us that are moving towards the more spiritual, more health-minded, because we're realizing that the tools are here and the viaducts are right here. Anyway, that is basically pineal gland 101. And I had two questions about it, that one in particular, this one thing in particular, not just about reading in general. And the first one was like, what opens or ignites the pineal gland? And yes, it is meditation, for sure. But I also want to bring up something that a lot of people might find some relief from, and also may not agree with me on this one, but not, you know, much like when I talk to people about what movement is best for their health when I'm reading them for medical reading. Yoga is not for everybody. Every practice is not for everybody. Some people's bodies react best to water. Some people's bodies react best to a different kind of release, like running. As a spiritual person, and obviously somebody who's a reader, I think it's really important that we don't just accept one concept and one way of doing things. Yoga works for certain people. Yoga works for certain people who can embrace a certain culture. And it, you know, what we do physically to keep ourselves healthy should come easily. You know, forcing yourself to run when your body isn't really built for it and you don't enjoy it doesn't do much good in the big picture, because dread happens and we have toxins and acids that are released and bile into our stomach, and the next thing you know, we don't feel great about it, but we do it anyway because we have to. It's never a good idea. You must find the thing that you enjoy. This also covers meditation, and meditation is not easy for everybody. Everybody has very different experiences. Everybody has different traumas they walk in with. Which brings me to the next question, and both questions were actually given by my friend Anna out in California. Hello, Anna. And she asked, and which was going to be my answer anyway. And she said, does visualization ignite the pineal gland? Now, I don't have the best time all the time with meditation, and very often other friends of mine who are mediums do not have the best time with meditation either. But what does work for us, and what does ignite it for us, is visualization. Is not trying to necessarily clear the mind, but to bring something into the mind that calms it. It also takes the pressure off of, we've managed somehow in this world to like demand perfection from exercise, and demand perfection from just getting fresh air, and demand perfection from even what quiets us. Very often, if I have back-to-back readings in the course of a day, I really have to sort of sit there and listen to myself in between the readings and be like, what is it I want to do right now? And last week, it was literally switch on the TV for 15 minutes and space out at something that made no sense to me, or didn't matter to me. Like, I think I ended up watching a really old Will and Grace or something, but it was the one thing. Also, and for those of you that are also intuitives and work on this realm, you know, electronics react to us, and we tend to react to electronics because, you know, that's how the spirits come through to us, is through the electricity and the energy in the air. So my phone's always freaking out if I read a lot. I go through an entire week without reading, my phone doesn't react. Now I always have a hard time with my phone. I've done readings where the TV in the room suddenly comes on. It's always amazing to me how that happens. But that's the thing that can sort of like take my brain away from it. So I'm a big fan of visualization because it really takes the pressure off of having to meditate. There are those people who is in need of it. I feel like if you can embrace visualization, which is sort of relaxing your mind and closing your eyes for a second and even thinking of something that you just really love. If it's a song you love, it's a picture of a flower, it's a place you'd rather be for a moment, and let the body react to happy, let the serotonin get out and move around from your pineal gland. I think absolutely, I think it ignites more. I think in many ways, joy and love ignite it far better than just trying to calm yourself. I can't always calm myself. I live in the middle of New York City, and I'm an empath, so I have to juggle those things quite often. I have to shut myself in my room sometimes. I just have to sort of chill out and have like the quietest of days. And what that quietest of days means for me might be very different than you. So thank you, Anna, for bringing up visualization, because it is so important. It's, you know, actually many years ago, at the Cooper Hewitt Museum, which is the only Smithsonian museum in New York City, every few years they do like what wins design, and it could be anything. And one of the wonderful things that I saw there was this huge TV, and it was this very animated, over-the-top cartoon of really adorable penguins running through the snow, sliding through the snow, snow everywhere. And I said as I walked by before I read the plaque, you know, I feel cold just looking at it, but it's so cute, it really lifts me up. And it turns out that this won for this amazing exhibit because it was what they showed to extreme burn victims. So it was cold, and it had to do with joy. And they said, there was a very long explanation of it, the difference with extreme burn victims just regulating their own temperature and how the joy came through their body came through watching this amazing video. So I think visualization for us is so much stronger than a meditation, when, you know, we demand a lot from things that are supposed to be really great for us, and these things are really great for us. And the people that can meditate in that way and get themselves to the kneeling pillow and do this, I think, you know, God love you. Also another thing is, a number of years ago, I was invited to sort of an open, I mean, it had to be about 20 some odd years ago. I was invited to Shambhala for sort of an open house and day of like learning meditation, which was like, oh, great, I would love to sort of hear it. And it was actually taught by, at the time, the very young son of Trungpa Rinpoche. He is also Rinpoche, and I believe he is now in charge of the Shambhala beliefs. But at the time, he was quite young. I mean, he was 20 some odd years ago. I think we were maybe the same age, which was very funny, because he spoke like a very young person, but, you know, he's a Tibetan monk. And somebody had asked, you know, there's like how I've had that moment of meditation. I mean, she was almost heartbroken about it, this woman, where I have this glimpse of calm and emptiness in my brain. And then it's fleeting and it goes away. And like, how do I get that back? And he was like, literally, hell if I know. Half the time I can't even get myself to the mat. You know how hard it is to get to the mat? And this is my job. Like, this is my destiny in life, is to be this person. But if I could tell you that, we wouldn't all be having to sit here and study together and figure it out. I appreciated so much his very real and very grounded view of something that we really assume everybody who is a leader in some spiritual way is actually so grounded and honest about it. And I feel that visualization is probably an easier step for a lot of us than sitting there and really trying to reach the sort of like inner nirvana and perfection in our work. And the fact is that everything's going to be messy no matter what. The world is messy, life is messy, and nothing's really great about it. When it's not messy, life gets really boring. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This has been lovely, and you can always ask me questions again. You can send me questions. I'm happy to answer them if they come up later. And thank you again. I wish you the best day.